A 2,000-year-old scroll from the Roman town of Herculaneum has been digitally unwrapped. Scientists have virtually unrolled it using X-ray scans and artificial intelligence technology.
Beneath nearly 2 millennia of volcanic ash, a silent witness to Rome's intellectual life has finally begun to speak. The charred remains of a Herculaneum scroll, entombed by the catastrophic eruption of Mount Vesuvius in AD 79, have long teased historians with the promise of lost knowledge. For centuries, its brittle, coal-like cylinders resisted every attempt at unrolling, preserving secrets about Roman philosophy, morality, and daily life that were thought irretrievably lost. Now, scholars have glimpsed the scroll's content for the first time without touching it. So, what did X-ray scans reveal about the charred Herculaneum scroll? And how does it solve the lost Roman history? Today, we'll answer just that: Mount Vesuvius and the destruction of Herculaneum. Mount Vesuvius erupted in AD 79 with a force that modern volcanologists classify as Plinian, named after Pliny the Younger, whose eyewitness account remains the primary historical record of the disaster. The eruption column is estimated to have risen more than 30 kilometers into the atmosphere, ejecting pumice, ash, and volcanic gases at a rate of several cubic kilometers in less than 24 hours. The volcano had shown no recorded activity for centuries before this event, and the communities around the Bay of Naples, Pompeii, Herculaneum, Oplontis, and Stabiae were thriving Roman settlements when the mountains suddenly ruptured. According to modern calculations based on tephra deposits, Mount Vesuvius released thermal energy equivalent to several 100,000 Hiroshima-sized bombs, transforming a quiet coastal region into a catastrophic landscape within hours. This was nature's wrath at its full capacity. Herculaneum, a wealthy seaside town located roughly 7 kilometers from the volcano, experienced a fate distinct from that of nearby Pompeii. While Pompeii was buried gradually under falling ash and pumice from the initial eruptive column, Herculaneum was impacted later in the sequence, when the eruption column collapsed repeatedly and sent pyroclastic surges racing toward the coast. These surges, which are superheated clouds of volcanic gas, ash, and pulverized rock, moved at speeds exceeding 100 kilometers per hour and carried temperatures estimated at between 250 degrees Celsius and 500 degrees Celsius. The first surge reached Herculaneum around midnight on the 24th to the 25th of August, killing the inhabitants instantly through thermal shock. Unlike Pompeii's slower burial, Herculaneum's destruction occurred in seconds, leaving bodies, buildings, and household objects sealed beneath meters of volcanic material with remarkable clarity. The pyroclastic deposits at Herculaneum reached depths of approximately 20 meters in many areas, compressing structures but also creating an oxygen-poor environment that prevented decay. The intense heat carbonized organic materials instead of incinerating them, producing a rare form of preservation. Wooden beams, furniture, textiles, and even the upper floors of buildings survived in carbonized form. Archaeologists have recovered carbonized loaves of bread, wooden doors with visible grain patterns, beds, boxes, and fishing nets, offering a level of preservation largely unmatched elsewhere in the Roman world. The same thermal process affected papyri, turning them into brittle, coal-like cylinders that retain the ink but are too fragile to unroll manually. This unique preservation environment has made Herculaneum a critical site for understanding not just Roman architecture and daily life, but also ancient written culture. Among the most extraordinary finds in Herculaneum is the Villa of the Papyri, discovered in the 18th century through deep tunneling operations ordered by King Charles VII of Naples. The villa covered an estimated 30,000 square meters and extended toward the coastline in multi-level terraces based on inscriptions, architectural scale, and the presence of Greek philosophical texts. Scholars attribute the villa to Lucius Calpurnius Piso Caesoninus, consul of 58 BC and father-in-law of Julius Caesar. The villa's library, the only surviving intact library from the classical world, contained approximately 1,800 papyrus scrolls housed in wooden shelves. These scrolls were carbonized by the pyroclastic surges, and buried under roughly 20 meters of material, which preserved but effectively sealed them for nearly 2 millennia. Early attempts to unroll them in the 18th and 19th centuries often caused significant damage, but enough text was recovered to identify many scrolls as works of the Epicurean philosopher Philodemus of Gadara. Excavations at Herculaneum have revealed that the pyroclastic deposits arrived in at least 4 major surges. The earliest layers contain fine ash and carbonized timbers, while later surges added denser material, including lithic fragments and compacted tuffs. Modern stratigraphic studies estimate that the final deposition at Herculaneum reached depths of 20 to 25 meters, depending on topography. This depth not only protected the carbonized remains, but also made excavation extremely challenging. Large parts of the city remain unexcavated beneath the modern town of Colano. Nonetheless, published excavation reports from the Herculaneum Conservation Project show that structural preservation, especially upper-story wooden architecture, is significantly better at Herculaneum than at Pompeii, largely due to the pyroclastic carbonization process. So, how did we stumble upon the scrolls in question? Discovery of the Herculaneum Scrolls. The discovery of the Herculaneum Scrolls began in the mid-18th century during the reign of Charles VII of Naples, when a series of underground excavations were launched to locate ancient Roman treasures buried by the AD 79 eruption of Mount Vesuvius. Between 1738 and the 1760s, teams of laborers working under the Bourbon monarchy dug deep vertical shafts and horizontal tunnels beneath the modern town of Resina, now Ercolano. Their primary aim was to uncover statuary, frescoes, and architectural features that could decorate the royal palaces at Portici and Naples. In 1750, workmen tunneling through compacted volcanic deposits reached the remains of an expansive Roman seaside villa. The structure later identified as the Villa of the Papyri. The villa's opulent design, featuring colonnades, panoramic terraces, and imported marble, immediately indicated the wealth and status of its ancient owner. Yet the most extraordinary discovery came in 1752, when excavators found rooms filled with tightly rolled, blackened cylinders that resembled pieces of charcoal. These objects, initially mistaken for firewood, were soon recognized as papyrus scrolls, carbonized by the pyroclastic surges of the volcanic eruption. Systematic recovery of the papyri continued through the 1750s and 60s. By the end of the Bourbon tunneling operations, a total of more than 1,800 papyrus scrolls had been extracted from the villa, making it the largest single cache of ancient manuscripts ever discovered. The majority were found stacked on shelves or stored in wooden boxes in what appeared to be a dedicated library or scriptorium. The scrolls were uniformly carbonized, reduced to cylinders between 2 and 4 centimeters in diameter, and fused so tightly that their internal layers could not be separated without extraordinary delicacy. Their condition was unprecedented in archaeology, carbonized yet preserved, ink still present but indistinguishable from the papyrus surface to the naked eye. Many of the scrolls bore faint impressions of ancient string wrappings, and some retained traces of the papyrus fiber pattern, allowing scholars to estimate their original lengths at up to several meters when unrolled. In the decades following their discovery, a series of efforts were undertaken to unroll the scrolls. The early techniques, however, were crude by modern standards and often catastrophic. The first major attempt was conducted by Antonio Piaggio, a conservator at the Vatican Library. Beginning in 1753, he designed a mechanical apparatus using silk threads and small weights to slowly peel apart the layers of a scroll over days or weeks. While Piaggio's method was less destructive than previous manual attempts, the scroll's brittleness meant that many tore into fragments or separated into thin carbonized flakes. Other early techniques, such as applying moisture, heat, or gelatin-based solutions to soften the papyrus, frequently resulted in ink smudging, structural collapse, or total loss. By the early 19th century, it was estimated that a significant portion of the scrolls, perhaps several hundred, had been damaged beyond recovery in the process of experimentation. Yet enough material was successfully unrolled to reveal that, Many of the texts were written in Greek and associated with the Epicurean philosopher Philodemus of Gadara, who lived in the 1st century BC. The fragility of the scrolls prompted the establishment of specialized conservation facilities, most notably the Officina dei Papiri Herculanesi, founded in Naples in 1755. Scholars from across Europe, including Carlo Maria Rossini, the first bishop of Pozzuoli, the French scholar Pierre-Henri Larcher, and the Scottish classicist George Buchanan, collaborated on producing deciphered transcriptions known as the Herculaneum papyri editions. These efforts yielded partial or complete texts of philosophical treatises on ethics, rhetoric, poetry, and music, though the majority of the villa's library remained locked within unopened, unreadable rolls. The French occupation of Naples in 1806 led to the relocation of some materials to Paris under Joseph Bonaparte, but most were later returned. By the late 19th century, the pace of unrolling slowed dramatically due to awareness that traditional methods were causing irreversible damage. This discovery holds singular significance because the Villa of the Papyri constitutes the only intact library from the classical world ever found. Other ancient libraries, such as those of Alexandria, Pergamon, or Rome's Palatine Library, survive only in literary accounts or fragmentary remains at Herculaneum. By contrast, an entire collection of manuscripts from a functioning Roman villa was preserved in situ, providing unparalleled evidence of private literary culture in the late Republic and early Empire modern scientific approaches to reading the scrolls. In the early 21st century, researchers developed a suite of advanced scientific methods specifically designed to overcome the carbonized, fused, and fragile condition of the Herculaneum papyri. Central to this transformation has been the use of high-resolution X-ray computed tomography, first applied to unopened scrolls in experimental form in the early 2000s and refined significantly by 2015. Unlike traditional CT used in medical imaging, these systems operate at far higher resolutions, often capable of capturing internal features at voxel sizes below 50 microns. The European Synchrotron Radiation Facility in Grenoble, France, played a decisive role beginning in 2015, when teams led by Brent Seals of the University of Kentucky conducted initial scans of scrolls known as PHRC 118 and PHERC 495. These scans revealed previously unknown internal geometries and demonstrated that X-ray phase contrast imaging could distinguish between layers even when no mechanical separation was possible. Phase contrast techniques detect changes in the refractive index of materials rather than their absorption, making them especially suitable for imaging carbonized papyrus, whose ink and substrate absorb X-rays at nearly identical rates. Synchrotron radiation has been crucial because it provides a highly coherent, extremely bright X-ray beam capable of resolving microscale differences across densely packed layers. Unlike conventional laboratory CT machines, synchrotrons generate X-rays with intensities billions of times greater, allowing the imaging of minute density variations within the scrolls. These facilities include the ESRF, the Diamond Light Source in Oxfordshire, England, and the Advanced Light Source at Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory in California. In 2019, upgraded beamlines at ESRF, particularly the Extremely Brilliant Source upgrade completed that year, made it possible to scan carbonized scrolls at resolutions as fine as 4 microns. The enhanced coherence of these beams improved phase contrast effects, allowing researchers to distinguish subtle structural features such as ink, traces that deviate only minimally in density from the papyrus fibers beneath them. Experiments carried out between 2019 and 2023 repeatedly demonstrated that synchrotron imaging could reveal internal winding patterns, creases, and fragment orientations with unprecedented clarity. However, the scans themselves do not yield readable text without advanced computational interpretation. Because carbon-based ink appears only as a slight density increase, sometimes less than 1% above the surrounding papyrus, machine learning algorithms became necessary to detect these signals reliably. Early attempts from 2016 to 2019 used traditional image processing approaches, but their results were inconsistent. In 2020, researchers began training convolutional neural networks on paired datasets of known papyrus samples, where the ink distribution was mapped before carbonization experiments. These training sets were produced through laboratory simulations in which modern papyrus sheets were inscribed with carbon ink, carbonized under controlled temperatures, and then scanned. By comparing pre- and post-carbonization data, machine learning models learned to recognize the minute textural and structural distortions produced by ancient ink in real Herculaneum scrolls. By 2023, these models could detect ink traces invisible to the human eye, achieving accuracy rates approaching 85% on test patches from digitally unwrapped scroll segments. Virtual unwrapping techniques form the final stage of the process, allowing the internal structure of each scroll to be computationally reconstructed layer by layer. This method originated with Seals's work on the Engedi scroll in 2015, where a charred biblical manuscript was digitally opened and read using volumetric CT and segmentation algorithms. Applied to the Herculaneum papyri, virtual unwrapping involves generating a three-dimensional mesh of the scroll's internal surfaces, isolating distinct layers and flattening them into two-dimensional surfaces suitable for text analysis. The process typically includes segmentation, as in identifying individual layers, surface extraction, or tracing the geometry of those layers, texturing, which is the mapping of the CT data to the flattened surface, and ink detection, which involves applying trained algorithms to highlight ink traces. Each step must compensate for distortions created by heat, compression, and irregular geometry. The Vesuvius Challenge, launched in March 2023 by Nat Friedman, Daniel Gross, and Brent Seals, accelerated these scientific advances by converting them into a global open science competition. So, what did we find out? Key findings from the recently scanned scroll. X-ray scans conducted at the Diamond Light Source in Oxfordshire in July 2024 allowed researchers to peer through hundreds of fused layers without peeling, scraping, or cutting. For the first time in the history of Herculaneum scholarship, a still-sealed scroll has revealed both its author and its title through non-destructive means. What emerged from the darkness inside Ferc 172 was unmistakable. A philosophical treatise by Philodemus of Gadara, the 1st century BC Epicurean thinker whose work shaped the intellectual life of the Villa of the Papyri. The recovered title, On Vices and Their Opposite Virtues, and In Whom They Are, and About What, anchors the scroll within a known multi-volume series, long thought partially lost. The revelation not only confirms the identity of the writer, but also uncovers the internal structure of his ethical project, which examines moral failings, emotional instability, and the human pursuit of a rational, tranquil life. The scans did more than fix a name and title. They exposed actual Greek words trapped for nearly 2 millennia in a brittle spiral of ash. Among the first deciphered was diatropy, meaning disgust, a term found twice in adjacent columns. Partial traces of fear and of life soon followed, each reinforcing the philosophical nature of the text. Philodemus, active roughly between 110 and 40 BC, was known for his analyses of emotion, desire, and ethical conduct within the Epicurean tradition, and these newly visible terms map cleanly onto the themes found in his surviving works. The virtual unwrapping revealed the final 26 lines of several columns, showing both ink traces and columnar layout with a clarity never before achieved in a sealed Herculaneum scroll. The ink of Ferc 172 proved unusually cooperative under X-ray examination, likely due to a dense contaminant, possibly lead, that heightened contrast against the papyrus substrate. This chemical peculiarity explains why the text appeared where hundreds of other scrolls have resisted all imaging attempts, offering a rare stroke of fortune in an otherwise intractable archive. The discovery also touched on the structure of the treatise itself. Near the reconstructed title, researchers identified what appears to be an alpha, a likely book number. If the reading holds, Herc 172 represents Book 1 of the On Vices series. This matters because scholars long assumed that the first book of the series corresponded to a different work, On Flattery, but the content revealed in Herc 172 does not align with that assumption. This correction forces a re-evaluation of how Philodemus organized his ethical writings, and how scribes packaged multi-volume philosophical projects in the late Republic. The unusual placement of the book number on the same line as the title, rather than in a separate colophon, sheds light on scribal habits and textual conventions otherwise lost. Graduate researchers Marcel Roth and Misha Novak, working within the Vesuvius Challenge framework, independently identified the title and author, and their reading was subsequently confirmed by papyrological experts. For their contribution, they received a $60,000 prize. Philodemus was deeply embedded within the elite cultural circles of Herculaneum, especially the household of Lucius Calpurnius Piso Cassininus, whose villa, lavish, sea-facing, and filled with statuary, contained the only intact library to survive from classical antiquity. Piso's patronage allowed Philodemus to write extensively on ethics, poetics, rhetoric, and music, and many of his texts remained unpublished until their rediscovery in the 18th century. PHERC 172 adds to this corpus with a direct window into his thinking on moral corruption, emotional imbalance, and the societal impact of unchecked desire. Philodemus's Epicureanism stood at odds with the competitive intensity and conspicuous consumption that defined Roman elite culture in the late Republic. While men like Julius Caesar and Pompey sought glory, territory, and the adulation of crowds, Philodemus advocated for moderation, self-reflection, and inner tranquility. He viewed vice not only as an individual moral defect, but as a source of broader social harm. Greed, ambition, and the relentless pursuit of status could fracture communities, destabilize households, and erode civic bonds. In On Vices, these dynamics appear to be analyzed through examples of emotional disorder and ethical misjudgment, showing how personal failings scale into public consequences. His surviving works frequently critique prominent Romans for indulgence, theatricality, and the misuse of wealth, arguing that emotional mismanagement fuels political chaos, as surely as flawed institutions do. Philodemus's observations resonate uncannily with the social realities of his time. The last decades of the Republic were marked by civil wars, political purges, and widening inequality. Moralists from Sallust to Cicero described Rome as a city corrupted by luxury and destabilized by ambition. Philodemus's emphasis on emotional control, ethical consistency, and intellectual grounding thus emerges as part of a larger cultural conversation about the causes of decline. The scroll gives us back a voice from the 1st century BC, speaking again with clarity about fear, disgust, virtue, and the struggles of living ethically in a turbulent world. But let's ask ourselves this: is today's world much different? And what is to become of society as it exists today? Well, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Did you like this video? If you did, please consider liking, dropping a comment, and hitting the subscribe button so that you don't miss out on our new uploads. Also, don't miss this video you see on your screen right now. It's truly unbelievable.